Yeah, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Filming on the iPhone today instead of the old C920, so hopefully the visuals are a bit better. Just have to wipe down these boards, a bit oily from when we put them up. But yeah, we have reached a good little point within the year, which is the end of the semester for me. So we just finished the summer semester over there in the US with Holy Apostles College and Seminary. So we'll have a bit more than a month, I think, break between now and the fall semester, which is going to be an exciting time to not only produce more videos, we're going to get into the live streams as well, as I mentioned on the last one, get into some Q&As, get the Instagram back up and running again. Anyway, long story short, I'm excited to be able to devote some more energy to this, but that's probably not why you're here. You've clicked on the video because I'm breaking down a very important topic, which is work. And I'm going to give a bit of a background here before I actually dive into the topic. And the topic is arising from an essay that I wrote earlier in the year about Saint John Paul II's, Pope John Paul II's Laborem Exercens, which is a encyclical that he wrote about the nature of work, the exercise of work on the part of human beings. And he establishes that as much more than just physical labor, which I don't think is something that comes intuitively to people. You know, I think one of these things that we struggle with as a modern society, and I talk about this within the essay itself, is that we've reduced work to primarily just its economic function. Now, while there are people, you know, who do have very fulfilling careers and stuff, I think they're probably in the minority. You know, work is treated as something to get through, the clock on, clock off mentality, work 9 to 5. It's not really seen as something that is integrated into the rest of your life, that is understood as part of your vocation, part of your sanctification, participation with God's creative work. There's a whole theological and spiritual dimension which has been removed from work, and I think it's definitely for the worse, because it contributes to the overwhelming sense of meaninglessness that is present within the world today. And when you take this activity that you spend, you know, however many thousands and thousands of hours a year doing, you know, for majority of your life, if that whole part, which is, let's give it a third, if we minus sleep hours, half of your life, if half of your life you perceive as unfulfilling, as a grind, it doesn't make you happy, it detracts from your life, from the rest of your life, then you're kind of rowing upstream, you know, you're kind of going against the tide, and that's very difficult. So we're going to break this down from a very simple and principled perspective. So let's dive in. Since the Edenic state of original justice in the garden, work has been a part of a man's life. Now, this is actually a really important point, because a lot of people think Adam's punishment for the fall was that he would have to work and toil in the garden. And that's true, but Adam was actually working prior to the fall. So in this state of original justice, or we could say in the ideal state of things, Adam still had responsibility. He had stewardship over the garden. That was actually part of his vocation. So work isn't just a punishment. There's obviously something more integral to the act of working that is essential and good. And that's a big part of today's topic, of today's argument. Tending to the garden, naming the animals, stewarding God's creation. Today that hasn't changed, but since the fall we have been doomed to toil hard by the sweat of our brow, and our work would bear little fruit. Anthropologically, work is a staple of human life, and the Church has always had a rich theological and practical understanding of its integration into human life. The Industrial Revolution and the modern age, however, have brought with them a number of technological and ideological developments that have subverted man as the subject of work and idolized productivity and capital growth over seemingly everything else. John Paul II's Laborem Exercens was published in 1981 on the 90th anniversary of Venerable Leo XIII, Pope, Rerum Novarum, and intended to push back against these disordered economic frameworks and re-establish work as fundamentally human and integral to eudaimonia, human flourishing, and spirituality. Put simply, that work is more than just the physical labor that is being accomplished. John Paul II defines this distortion as economism. Economism is the reduction of human work to its productive and economic output, stripping it of its personal, moral, and spiritual dimensions. Norton, who was one of the guys that I read writing this essay, so he's got a book about, I forget what it's called, it'll be here in the footnotes actually. Integrating Work and Leisure, the complementary relationship between John Paul II and Dies Domine. Dies Domine is an encyclical by written about the Sabbath, right? Keeping the Sabbath holy, and what does holy leisure look like? So, economism is the reduction of human work to its productive and economic output, stripping it of its personal, moral, and spiritual dimensions. Norton describes this as the restriction of work solely to its economic purpose, a reduction so complete that moral and spiritual considerations of work are a priori excluded. Norton describes this as a restriction of work. I've repeated that sentence. So I'm going to break down this thesis, this argument, through 3 points. First, the subjective personal dimension, so on man as the subject of work. Secondly, a theological grounding in creation. And thirdly, a social and vocational meaning. So the subjective-objective distinction is one of the opening points of the encyclical, and it's really the backdrop of John Paul II's entire moral philosophy, more commonly referred to as the personalist norm. Across any realm of human morality, ethics, whether that be sexuality, social life, moral ethics, a human being is never viewed as a means to an end, whether that end be pleasure, economic value, something that can be disposed of at an inconvenience. Rather, the human being as subject has an inherent dignity grounded in the imago Dei, in the image of God. Because of this radical ontological reality, ontological means concerned with being. So this isn't just a label that is slapped on to a human animal, at baptism. There's something fundamentally different about our nature and its capacity for the divine and its reflection of God. Because of this radical ontological reality, we say that the dignity that every human being possesses is inalienable. You can't separate someone from that dignity. It is the person themselves who holds a priceless value above all else, a value that cannot be objectified, cannot be made the object of a particular activity, whether that be lust, sexual dominion, exploitation, or merely being a cog in the means of production. John Paul II claims that the Church has always viewed man as the subject of actions here upon earth, and most particularly of work. Human beings work as persons, performing various actions, quote, belonging to the work process, independently of their objective content, so independent of whether I'm assembling a computer or tilling the soil. These actions must all serve to realize the humanity of the workers, to fulfill the calling to be persons that is theirs by reason of their very humanity. So there's an interesting point being made here that I think I talk about it just as we go on, but that you see horror stories of, kids being raised that, they don't know how to read, or they're not giving social interactions. I think they did these horrible experiments where this baby would be fed food and whatever, but they wouldn't have interaction with a human being. And they basically end up being animals, right? That's literally a feral human being. And even for us in the Western world, we're all literate, we all have certain capacities and intellect and things like that. But there's still a process of realization that has to take place, right? You can think of someone who doesn't take their education seriously. Perhaps, they just go to work, they numb themselves with entertainment from Netflix and stuff like that. we wouldn't consider that person really flourishing as a human, right? They're not living the examined life that Aristotle talked about. They're probably not happy. They wouldn't describe themselves as happy. The human fulfillment, the human ideal has to be realized, and that there's a process to that. And John Paul II is saying that work is a part of that process, an essential part. Humans are divinely destined to realize and constitute themselves through their work. What follows from this is that workers are subjects and not objects of their work. So in language, when you say a sentence, you have a subject and an object. I drank the tea. So I am the subject that is drinking the tea. I am performing the action. I am acting upon the cup of tea, right? The mate. You can flip that. You can say, well, if we're thinking about it philosophically, how John Paul II is describing it here, well, what if you have work, or you have 1 million units of production which require the object of me and you to produce? So suddenly the subject, loosely speaking, the thing that is prioritized, that takes precedence, is the million units of production, which needs you and I as a tool to fulfill that. So in some ways, the higher goal, you could say the higher entity of the economic factory, is acting upon us, and we are serving it. We are being acted upon. We are being used, just like the tea is being used. So what John Paul II is saying, that workers must be subjects and not objects of their work. The sources of human dignity of work are to be sought primarily in their subjective dimension, so on how the individual relates with the work. Even in our Edenic state of original justice, God granted us the task of tending to the garden and stewarding creation. It is in the act of co-creation of work that we participate in the act of becoming, and where we ourselves grow and develop in a way that is primary to the economic output of the labor. In the words of John Paul II, man is not for work, but work is for man. So as stated in the introduction, moving on now, let's see if there's anything else I want to touch on there. Yeah, I think this view of work, it's not going to remove the objective dimension, right? It's not going to remove the fact that we still need to figure out a way to produce 1 million units of this thing. But you can see how it would only take a very minor sort of switch in mental framing. You could think of a corporation that, values its employees, that looks after them, that has a charitable manager, takes some time off, whatever. I'm not saying that people need to be babied, but you could easily over-focus on the product as opposed to the individual. But, and Jocko would say this, that the best way to focus on the product is to focus on the individual, because a happy individual, a good team, a good environment, a good work culture is going to result in much better economic results anyway. So this isn't even asking people to compromise on their economic pursuits, right? And I think we've all experienced this with ourselves. You can even apply it to something like education. Well, when you actually focus on the student, not to trying to get them to pass the test or just trying to copy and paste that knowledge into their head, but let's build a relationship. Let's illustrate to this child, to this group of people, the importance of what we're studying. And it's a self-serving way of doing things, right? Self-serving as in it serves the mission, not yourself. So, as stated in the introduction, economism is the reduction of human work to its productive and economic output. The application of this idea leads to the discourse on the reductionist model of economy and labor. That is not to say that economic models in the past haven't exploited and objectivized workers. Of course they have, but it is a particular character of modernity. The Industrial Revolution, for example, brought with it inventions that facilitated such exploitation. For example, artificial lighting allowed laborers to work longer hours, effectively to the point of exhaustion daily, as opposed to being regulated by day and night rhythms and the seasons. The production line in factories allowed growth of the economy at a scale never seen before and increased the productive capacity of a single human person to the point that a lot of times the bottleneck in these systems are actually just how many people you can get in, right? Greater profits, scalability, more opportunity for capital expansion. What John Paul II says, or spends a significant amount of time addressing, is that not only is it the case that the objectivization of the worker is much easier due to the technological environment, but the two predominant economic systems of the time, and I suppose still of our time, capitalism and socialistic communism, both optimize. So optimize is like, when I consider an action, like let's say I'm considering my diet. If I want to optimize my diet for muscle growth, I'm going to focus on protein, right? If I want to optimize my diet for fat loss, then I'm going to reduce certain other foods, right? So it's the principle by which you determine the way that you're going to do something. Capitalism and communism, they both optimize for things other than the individual. So capitalism optimizes for the owner of the means of production and the maximization of profits. And John Paul II directly names this logic, and I think we see less of this now, right, with certain social justice laws, but for example, trying to get the lowest possible wages under the principle of maximum profit, unsafe work conditions, disregard for the worker's living situation. Those would be examples in which the individual is not prioritized at the sake, the individual is sort of being run over, right? He's being used at the expense for the profit. Socialism, on the other hand, is sort of that worker bee mentality, right? It's the worship of the state. Well, actually, the state is much more important than you as an individual. So it's at the absolute cost of the individual, the state is more important. Even philosophically, even though the individual is part of the state, the worker is not truly the subject. He is a resultant of the economic relations of a given period, still determined by material forces, rather than recognized as a free person. Neither system keeps the person as the true subject at the core of labor and the economic system as a whole. So in Gaudium et Spes, document from Vatican II, when a man works, he not only alters things in society, but he develops himself. Rightly understood, this kind of growth is of greater value than any external riches which can be garnered. A man is more precious for what he is than for what he has. Josef Pieper, who is another great philosopher, warned that modern culture had produced what he called the total work society, a world in which human identity is entirely defined by productive function, leaving no space for the contemplative and receptive dimension of life, which is leisure, without which culture and what makes humanity truly human cannot survive. I think this is a trap that it's very easy to fall into as a man, which is basing your self-worth on how successful you are, right? On your economic production. And in some ways it's a good instinct because, you know, a lot of times, you know, if you, let's say you're struggling or you don't have a lot of money, a lot of times that is something you need to focus on, right? But even once you've gone past the point of, you know, I've got everything I need, I can put food on the table, you can still stay stuck in that mindset, right? Of constantly pushing for the next thing, for the next target, for the next goal, investing, buying the next thing. It's like a mindset that is necessary for survival, but actually when you extrapolate it to the rest of your life, it doesn't serve you at all. And I think part of the underlying issue under that is, well, if you're not taking your identity from God, from Christ, from your God-given identity, right? You will automatically end up taking it from something else because you can't take it on nothing. You know, if it's not God, it's going to be money, it's going to be pleasure, it's going to be fame. How many likes are you getting? Probably not getting heaps on this video because it's long and boring for a lot of people, but even think about what Pieper has just told us about. Leaving no space for the contemplative, receptive dimension of life. The self-examined life, the examined life that Aristotle talks about, requires dialogue, requires reading, requires thinking, requires reception, which is receiving. And you don't just want to be constantly listening to videos and podcasts, right? And hopefully this is something that I'm able to achieve with these videos and these live streams, is actually giving you, the viewer, an opportunity to sit down and say, number one, what the hell is this guy talking about? But number two, actually allow this idea for you to understand it and let it sit in your mind. Think about it. Think about how it applies to your life and kind of integrate it, right? How is this going to change the way that you look at work when you show up there tomorrow morning, right? I think, as I said at the start, the loss of meaning of ordinary day-to-day activities is horrible, because you throw out half of someone's life as meaningless. Could you survive with only half of your life as meaningful? And is the other half of life meaningful? Oftentimes it's not, right? You're going home to a shitty situation too. You're going home to numb yourself with entertainment. You're going home to a relationship maybe that you haven't paid enough attention to. So you're also letting that ball drop. So a huge part of this, and I've said it in multiple videos now, but it's the understanding that the definition of a meaningful life is that everything you do matters. And you have to be thoroughly convicted of that, because otherwise you will get worn away. And this is what Viktor Frankl talks about in Man's Search for Meaning. In the objectively the worst situation that you'll ever be in, he's in the camp, he's lost his wife and kids, he's got cancer, his friends are all dying around him, he's probably going to die himself. How can you find meaning? How can meaning illuminate the absolute catastrophe of the world that is in front of you? And that's a question you have to answer. I can't answer that for you. I'm giving you ideas here on how to help with that. But unless you're thoroughly convicted of that yourself, you're always going to have that existential anxiety, and your identity will never be firmly rooted in Christ, because you're not convinced, right? You're going to keep on finding those affirmations, that validation of the flawed identity that the world has given you, economism being one of them. And it's an endless rat race, and it's a real shame for people to be stuck in this, but that's precisely why we need to give ourselves the opportunity to sit with something like this. Why did John Paul II write this document? Why did Leo XIII write Rerum Novarum? Well, they were onto something, believe it or not. Let me just have him out there. It's thirsty work doing all this talking. So we've looked at the subjective dimension, which is very much related to the view of economism, right? To the reduction of work to its economic value. And now we're going to go into that theological vocation of work, so to speak. With the problem deeply articulated, the positive vision of work breathes life into this entire area of thought. As mentioned earlier, work was part of God's plan for man right from the beginning. God in Genesis commands humanity to fill the earth and subdue it. John Paul II reads this as the very form through which the Imago Dei, the image of God, is expressed. In carrying out this mandate, man reflects the very action of the Creator of the universe in the action of work and carrying out the mandate, making every act of work a participation in creation rather than mere production. The image of God is not simply a mark of dignity, but it is a sharing in the divine nature. Norton says that because it is in the divine nature to create, our actions, our work, is called to participate in the very action of the Creator of the universe. to create and steward, in our fidelity to the small gift and parcel of the earth to which we have been entrusted by God Himself. We are participating in the providence and initial creative act of God. John Paul II says that by carrying out this work in the spirit of stewardship, we can justly consider that by our labor we are unfolding the Creator's work. I will make up for what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ. Contributing by our personal industry to the realization and history of the divine plan. How good is that quote? John Paul II says that by carrying out this work in the spirit of stewardship, we can justly consider that by our labor, we are unfolding the Creator's work, contributing by our personal industry to the realization and history of the divine plan. There is also an element of human endeavor related to this, as it's not simply the work executed robotically, but that man, within the limits of his own human capabilities, in a sense continues to develop that activity and perfects it as he advances further and further in the discovery of the resources and values contained in the whole of creation. It's about getting better at the game, right? We don't just want to, milk 5 cows. We also don't want to milk, 1 million cows and have them all locked up in cages. But we want to figure out, in accordance with nature, the cows having a primarily grass-based diet, living happy, free lives, so they're getting fed all the right things. Let's milk 1,000 cows. Let's figure out how to reap the most we can. How can we produce the most amount of milk? How can we, cultivate our talents in the utmost best way by studying the science of soil, by studying the science of nutrition, by doing good management here on farm, right? There's a huge difference between just going through the motions and really stewarding what you're doing in front of you. How do I look after and make sure that the individuals within this farm, within this business, are also realizing their own potential? Am I explaining them things? Am I talking to them? Am I asking them about their career? Are they themselves, am I stewarding them as people? It seems that in the same way that a child must venture into the world of unknown before him in order to test himself and grow the areas tested, socially, physically, emotionally, an adult man or woman in the act of diligent, faithful work is able to similarly test themselves and participate deeply in the structure of our human society and contribute to the universal destination of goods. As John Paul II states in Centissimus Annus, God gave the earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all its members. This is the foundation of the universal destination of the earth's goods. So just as my diligence, in some ways, our diligence here as farmers helps provide for others, other people's diligence, Elon Musk with Starlink is allowing me to upload this video for you to listen to. My diligence in my study is allowing you to learn something. All of these technological devices is their diligence in doing that is helping me. The builder's diligence in this house is helping me. So as each of us fulfill our part of the deal, right? As each of us cultivate our own talents, we're contributing to this universal destination of goods. So that's completely different, right? Like I could go out to work and say, man, I hate this, it's cold, my back's sore, it stinks, it's wet or whatever, which is all true, and it will always be true. But how about this is my part to contribute to society? How about God wills that I do this job? How about I am, growing in virtue? How about God is sanctifying me through this work? How about I'm supporting literally the New Zealand and global economy by doing this? Well, it's a very different sort of lens to look at things through, right? All right, final point, which is just what I've been talking about. We are relational beings, and a key part of our human development is the relationship and dynamic between our ability to affect the physical world around us to bring fruit from the earth, to grow and raise animals, to provide value and solutions for other people and communities. Not only is it fundamental to our own interior development, but it also contains within it a radical social development. In that while you personally benefit from work, the work itself is also oriented outwards. Work also constitutes a foundation for the formation of family life. It influences the whole process of education in the family, for the very reason that everyone becomes a human being through, among other things, work. And becoming a human being is precisely the main purpose of the whole process of education. Simultaneously to providing for himself, the worker serves the nation and the common good, contributing to a collective heritage that speaks to the universal destination of goods and stewardship of the earth. From rerum novarum onwards, the Church has always defended our right to private property, but only in the context of the common destination of goods. What this means is that while private property is legitimate, it carries with it a social obligation. God intended the earth with everything contained in it for the use of all human beings and peoples. Created goods should be in abundance for all. John Paul II addresses this in Centissimus Annus, that the earth yields its goods only through human labor. So the universal destination of goods and the dignity of work are inseparable. The duty of the worker across the chain of command is, of course, primarily for the well-being of himself and his family. But as soon as these needs are met and being met, the value and surplus of the business then extends outwards to the free market and those people who are in need. It is an inherently communal venture. Norton develops this further, arguing that authentic work integrates the economic and the spiritual, because the person is not merely employed in something, but called to participate in something. Work understood as vocation rather than function. So, I'm not going to read through the whole conclusion, because I'm just going to be repeating myself. But understood rightly, these ideas have the power to inspire a world which is tired of work, to ingrain the understanding of pursuit and divine expression in our day-to-day. But if we heed not the warning, this is a warning, we will fall into what has commonly been known as the rat race. I hope this isn't muted. The matrix, a world where one does not consciously decide about work in ways that befit their transcendent dignity, but rather serve the master, mammon, capitalism, the state, the results of the shareholder. Man, I'm losing my voice. But with that, we've wrapped up the video. So I want to do a bit of a closing sequence here just to fill you guys in on what's going on, how you can support the mission. This was an important video. It was definitely the broader theology of this. I want to point you towards the Fit for the Kingdom YouTube channel where Dean Mashevsky did our talk at the last St. Michael's troops here in Christchurch. And he talked about how to live your faith in the workplace. So actually practically, but they're sort of intertwined, but not completely. How do you witness to the faith? How do you maintain your faith in an environment that may be opposed to it? So go listen to that talk. I'll put it in the description. If you want to support me free of charge, and I hope you would, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click a thumbs up. Click the thumbs up button. And if you did make it to the end, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm throwing these like a frisbee into the void because I don't often get heaps of response. But if you made it to the end, I much appreciate it. I hope this work was able to benefit you in some way. But just let me know in the comments, you know. Just let me know, good video, this was helpful. Just let me know, all right? And it'll also help boost the algorithm. Please follow me on the other social media platforms, so primarily Rumble, which serves as a free speech YouTube, so to speak, but I upload all my videos on there, and in the possible scenario that I get banned from YouTube, at least you'll know instantly where to stay tuned with the rest of the content. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Telegram as well, but make sure you check all of those out. In terms of Fit for the Kingdom, we are actually going to start a school community. So with some courses, some live calls, we've got Father Ben starting with Theology of the Body. So if you're interested in taking your faith formation even more seriously, I know you get a lot of it from me here, go check out the Fit for the Kingdom website, check out the school. If you are in Australia and New Zealand, of course, come to our in-person events. If you're interested in starting a chapter, we have already had a lot of interest from different cities. We've got some standard operating procedures, some resources to send you. All you have to do is get together with a few people, hit a workout, hit a mass, do some prayer together. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but we're meant to live and grow in the faith as a community. So if you don't have that around you, consider starting it, right? Consider kicking it off. And one-on-one coaching. If you would like to work with me one-on-one, perhaps you want a bit more of a targeted look at some areas in your life. You may be struggling with vice, addiction, lack of intention, lack of direction. You need some help discerning. I work with a small group of men one-on-one. I'm going to put a link to that below. You can have a look at what the process is like. You can watch some testimonials from past clients. And if it's something that you think might be for you, you can leave me an application and yeah, we'll have a conversation about it. But that's all from me. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Again, if you made it to the end, let me know. We might see you this weekend answering some questions live. All right, God bless.